The assumed temperature is runway dependent and can be obtained from two primary data sources. The first source is from dispatch. The dispatcher may simply supply the allowable assumed temperature for today's takeoff weight, wind, runway, and flap position. The second source for the assumed temperature is from a runway analysis. Displayed is a sample runway analysis for Boeing Field runway 13 right, takeoff flap 5. The planned takeoff weight is 64,000 kilograms. The actual temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. At today's actual temperature of 20 degrees Celsius and 0 wind, we can see the performance limited takeoff weight is 65,400 kilograms. The performance limited takeoff weight is greater than the actual takeoff weight. Therefore, reduced takeoff thrust can be used. To determine the assumed temperature, move up the climb limited and runway limited columns until the lowest weight, which just equals or exceeds the actual takeoff weight, is located. Note the temperatures which go with the identified weights. The lower temperature is the maximum assumed temperature allowed, 31 degrees Celsius in this case. Now let's assume you have been ordered to take off on the reciprocal runway. Will the assumed temperature be the same? Let's find out. Determine the maximum allowable assumed temperature using the displayed runway analysis for the new runway. You can use the slider provided to move the reference line up and down to make it easier to read the chart. Good. This assumed temperature would then be entered into the FMC. Notice that the assumed temperature was increased by 12 degrees with this runway change. This was due to the fact that the obstacles are less limiting on runway 31 left. Remember, the allowable assumed temperature is dependent on the airport, runway, flap position, and wind. Next, the flight crew enters assumed temperature, or select temp, into the CDU, or thrust mode select panel. The FMC or TMC will then provide the takeoff thrust settings based on the assumed temperature you have entered. If your airline has purchased the FMC takeoff speeds option, the FMC will also provide balanced fuel length takeoff speeds based on the assumed temperature you have entered. The FMC or TMC will limit the assumed temperature thrust reduction to no more than 25% thrust reduction. This is not a performance limit, but is dictated by a regulatory restriction.